What are you doing? Get away from him right now. Mark Anderson burst through his front door and stopped dead in his tracks. His son Leo sat on the stairs, his face all banged up and puffy, and the new nanny Miss Daisy had her hands all over him. Mark's important work bag tumbled to the floor. Leo was perched on the third step, shaking a little. His cheek had red marks like angry stripes, and a fresh purple bruise was blooming near his eye. And Miss Daisy, whom Mark had only hired 2 weeks ago, had both her hands gently cupped around Leo's face, her fingers wiggling in a super weird, careful way. Leo wasn't screaming or pulling away. He was looking at her like she was the most amazing person he'd ever seen. Mark's heart started to pound like a drum. "Step back," he commanded, his voice sharp like a broken piece of glass. Miss Daisy's hands quickly dropped. Leo flinched. "Leo, come here. Now." The little boy paused for just a tiny second, and that tiny pause stung Mark more than he expected. Finally Leo moved. Mark pulled him close, checking his face and arms, looking for more hurts. "Did she do this to you?" Leo shook his head. "No, Daddy, she was helping." "Helping?" Mark's eyes locked onto Miss Daisy. "My son has bruises all over his face. And what exactly were you doing?" Miss Daisy's voice stayed calm, but Mark could see her hands shaking a little. "Mr. Anderson, if you would just listen." "Listen to what?" Mark's voice got louder. "You've only been here 2 weeks, and I come home to find my son hurt and your hands all over him." "She was teaching me," Leo mumbled, his voice a bit wobbly, "how to talk to Ethan. He's deaf and nobody understands him, and he pushed me because—" Mark froze. "Wait, someone at school did this?" Leo nodded. Mark turned to Miss Daisy, his jaw tight. "And you knew?" Miss Daisy lifted her chin a bit. "He asked me not to tell you. That's not your choice to make." A sharp silence hung between them like ice cracking. "You're right," Miss Daisy said quietly. "I'm just the help." She turned and walked away. Mark stood there with Leo clinging to him, and a bad feeling twisted in his tummy. He realized he didn't really know his son at all, and the kind lady he had just been so mean to? She might have been the only one who did. Before we read on, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Because this story is about to show you something really important. That sometimes God puts special people in our lives exactly when we need them, even when we're too busy or blind to see it. Mark held Leo out a little, looking closely at his face. The bruises looked a few days old, soft purple around the edges and yellow in the middle. His son had been walking around like this for days and Mark had no idea. "How long has this been happening?" His voice was softer than he meant it to be. Leo stared at the floor. "Last Thursday during playtime." "Thursday?" Mark's mind raced. "That was almost a whole week ago. Why didn't anyone call me?" "The school? Your teacher?" Leo's shoulders went up to his ears. "I didn't tell them." "Why not?" Silence. Mark glanced down the hallway where Miss Daisy had gone, then looked back at his son. "Leo, I need you to talk to me." "Who is Ethan?" Leo's voice was tiny. "He's a boy in my class. He's 8. He can't hear anything and nobody knows how to talk to him, so he just sits by himself at lunchtime. And sometimes he gets really mad." "Mad enough to hit you?" "He didn't hit me." Leo looked up, his eyes looking a little mad too. "He pushed me. I fell into the brick wall by the playground. It was an accident." Mark's jaw tightened. "Accident or not, he hurt you." "He didn't mean to, Daddy, he was just—" Leo's voice cracked. He was frustrated. Nobody understands him, ever. "That's not your problem to fix." "But what if it is?" Leo's eyes filled with tears. "What if God put me there to help him?" Mark was surprised by Leo's words. He opened his mouth, then closed it. "Miss Daisy said that sometimes God uses regular people to show his love," Leo continued, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "She said that's what her brother needed when he was little. Someone to just try." "Her brother?" Leo nodded. "He's deaf too. Miss Daisy showed me pictures. She said he used to get into trouble all the time until someone learned sign language for him. So, I asked her if she could teach me for Ethan." Mark sat back on his heels, trying to understand the strange hand movements and how focused Leo had been on Miss Daisy's fingers. It wasn't about hurting, it was, "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" Leo looked away. You're always tired when you get home, and you look sad a lot. I didn't want to make it worse. Those words hurt Mark more than Leo's bruises. Mark pulled his son close, his throat feeling tight. You could never make anything worse, buddy. You hear me? Leo buried his face in Mark's shoulder. But even as Mark held him, a bad, heavy feeling settled in his stomach. He had accused Miss Daisy of hurting his son. He had looked at her like she was a danger, and all she had been doing was answering a 7-year-old's heartfelt wish. Mark closed his eyes. What had he done? Mark found Miss Daisy in the small room near the kitchen, the one that came with the job. Her suitcase was open on the bed, half full of neatly folded clothes. She didn't look up when he knocked. Mr. Anderson, I'll be gone by morning, she said quietly, placing a stack of books into the bag. Wait, Mark stepped inside. Leo told me about Ethan, about the sign language. Miss Daisy's hand stopped moving, but she didn't turn around. I jumped to conclusions, Mark continued. I saw the bruises and I thought. He stopped. I'm sorry. Miss Daisy finally looked at him. Her eyes looked tired. You don't have to apologize for protecting your son, Mr. Anderson. I wasn't protecting him. I was accusing you. She turned back to her packing. You saw what you saw. I understand. Do you? Mark's voice became softer. Because I'm trying to figure out why I acted that way, and I don't like the answer. Miss Daisy's shoulders stiffened. What answer? You tell me. He leaned against the doorframe. Would I have acted the same if you looked different? If you were older or white? Miss Daisy turned slowly. Is that what you're asking? Mark didn't answer. Miss Daisy sat on the edge of the bed. Mr. Anderson, I've been the help in many homes. I know how this works. You hired me to clean and watch Leo while you're at work. You didn't hire me to care about him. But you do. Yes, her voice cracked a little. I do. Why? Miss Daisy looked down at her hands. My little brother Danny was deaf. Growing up, I watched people treat him like he was broken. Teachers gave up on him. Kids avoided him. And he'd come home crying because nobody wanted to try. She quickly wiped her eyes. When Leo came to me asking how to talk to Ethan, I saw Danny. I saw a chance to do for someone else's brother what I wished the world had done for mine. Mark's throat felt tight. Where's Danny now? He died 2 years ago. Car accident. Oh, Miss Daisy, I'm so sorry. Don't. She stood, reaching for the suitcase. I knew what I was doing when I taught Leo without asking you. I knew it could cost me this job, but some things matter more than a paycheck. She zipped the bag closed. Mark's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. Northwood Academy. His heart sank. It's Leo's school, he said. Miss Daisy looked up, a quick flash of worry in her eyes. Mark answered. This is Mark Anderson. The voice on the other end was calm but firm. Mr. Anderson, this is Principal Thompson. We need you to come in first thing tomorrow morning. There's been an incident involving your son. Mark barely slept that night. He sat in Leo's room for most of it, watching his son breathe, trying to remember the last time they had really talked, really listened to each other. Morning came too fast. Miss Daisy was still there. She must have unpacked sometime in the night. Mark heard her moving around the kitchen at 5 a.m., making coffee like nothing had changed. I'll take him to school, Mark said when Leo came downstairs. Miss Daisy nodded, pouring juice into Leo's cup. Principal Thompson is expecting you at 8:30. How do you know? I called her last night. Told her you'd be there. Leo ate his breakfast quietly, his eyes darting between them. He looked small in his chair, delicate in a way Mark hadn't noticed before. The drive to Northwood Academy was quiet, except for the soft hum of the engine. Leo pressed his forehead against the window, watching the trees zip past. Am I in trouble? He finally asked. Nobody. I just need to talk to your principal about what happened. Are you going to tell them about Ethan? Mark glanced in the rearview mirror. Should I? Leo's reflection looked scared. He'll get expelled. They always expel him. Always. He's been to 4 schools already. His mom told Miss Daisy. Mark's hands tightened on the steering wheel. When did you meet his mom? I didn't, but Miss Daisy did. At pickup last week. Of course she did. Principal Thompson's office smelled like old books and air freshener. She was in her 50s with gray hair pulled back and reading glasses perched on her nose. "Mr. Anderson, thank you for coming." She gestured to a chair. "I'll get right to it. We've had many complaints about a student in Leo's class, Ethan Ramirez. He's been rough with other children, and last week your son was hurt." "I'm aware." "You are?" She looked surprised. "Because we have no record of you being told. Leo didn't report it." Principal Thompson frowned. "Well, several other parents have, and frankly, Mr. Anderson, we're not ready to handle a child with Ethan's needs. We've suggested his mother find a special school, but she's not keen on it." "What kind of needs?" "He's profoundly deaf, which means he can't hear at all, and he doesn't speak. He has a special learning plan, but without a dedicated interpreter, which we can't afford, he's struggling. And when he struggles, he lashes out." Mark leaned forward. "Has anyone tried to talk to him in his language?" Principal Thompson blinked. "I'm sorry. Sign language. Has anyone here learned sign language?" "Mr. Anderson, we have 200 students. And my son learned enough in 3 days." The principal's mouth opened slightly. "A 7-year-old learned enough sign language in 3 days to try to talk to this kid," Mark continued, his voice steady. "And you're telling me a school full of adults can't figure it out?" Principal Thompson's face turned a little red. "With all due respect," the office door opened. A woman stepped in, probably in her late 30s, with tired eyes and her work uniform still on. She looked like she'd come straight from a night shift. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said breathlessly. "Traffic was." She stopped when she saw Mark. "Who are you?" Principal Thompson stood. "Mrs. Ramirez, this is Leo's father." The woman's eyes filled with tears, and Mark realized this was Ethan's mother. Mrs. Ramirez stood in the doorway, her hands clutching her purse strap like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. "I'm so sorry," she said, looking right at Mark. "I heard what happened to Leo. I tried to get Ethan to apologize, but he can't." Her voice broke. "He doesn't know how to say sorry in a way people understand." Mark stood up slowly. "Mrs. Ramirez, please." She held up a hand. "Let me finish. I know you're angry. Every parent is angry. And I get it, I do. But he's not a bad kid. He's just..." Tears started to fall down her cheeks. "He's just so alone." Principal Thompson cleared her throat. "Mrs. Ramirez, we've talked about this before. Northwood simply doesn't have the tools." "I know what you have." Mrs. Ramirez's voice got stronger. "I know what you don't have. You've made that very clear. You're trying to do what's best for all students, except mine." The words hung heavy in the room. Mark really looked at this woman. The uniform that said she'd worked all night. The lines around her eyes that showed years of carrying heavy burdens all by herself. The way she stood like she was getting ready for another sad answer. "How old is Ethan?" Mark asked quietly. Mrs. Ramirez blinked, surprised he was talking to her. 8. He turns 9 in January. "And he's been to 4 schools?" She nodded, wiping her face. "They all say the same thing. We're not equipped. He needs specialized care. Like my son is some kind of broken toy that needs to be fixed instead of a child who just needs to be understood." "Mrs. Ramirez," Principal Thompson began. "No one is saying." "Yes, you are." Mrs. Ramirez's voice shook. "You've been saying it since October, and now you want me to pull him out so you don't have to deal with him anymore." Mark's chest felt tight. He thought about Leo's bruises, about the fear in his son's voice when he said Ethan would get expelled, about Miss Daisy teaching sign language in secret because she knew. She knew this is how it would happen. What if someone here learned? Mark said. Both women turned to him. "Learned what?" Principal Thompson asked. "Sign language. What if someone on staff learned enough to talk with Ethan?" Mrs. Ramirez stared at him like he'd just spoken a secret language she didn't understand. Principal Thompson shook her head. "Mr. Anderson, that would mean hiring someone new. I'll pay for it." Silence filled the office. "You'll what?" the principal said. Mark looked at Mrs. Ramirez. Her hand had moved to her mouth, her eyes wide. "I'll pay for whatever you need. Interpreter training. Whatever it takes." "Why would you do that?" Mrs. Ramirez whispered. Mark thought about Miss Daisy, about Leo, about the way his son had looked at him last night, hopeful and scared all at once. Because my son asked me to. Mrs. Ramirez's face crumpled. She covered her mouth with both hands, her shoulders shaking, and Principal Thompson sat back in her chair, totally stunned. But Mark wasn't finished. There's one rule, he said. The woman who's been teaching my son sign language, Mark said. Miss Daisy Miller. She's the one who trains your staff. Principal Thompson's eyebrows went up. Your housekeeper? She's not just. Mark stopped himself. She worked at the Boston School for the Deaf for 5 years. Her brother was deaf. If anyone can help Ethan, it's her. Mrs. Ramirez looked at him like he'd just offered her fresh air to breathe. The woman who talked to me at pickup? The one who signed beautiful boy to Ethan. Mark's breath caught. She did. Last Tuesday. Ethan came home and wouldn't stop smiling. I didn't know why until he showed me the sign. Mrs. Ramirez's voice trembled. Nobody's ever done that. Nobody's ever just seen him. Mark's chest ached. And your son, Mrs. Ramirez continued. Leo Ethan drew him too. Because Leo smiled at him in class last Thursday, just smiled. That's it. But to Ethan that was everything. Mark looked at this little boy who had been called dangerous, a problem to be kicked out. And all he saw was a child who had been silently screaming for someone, anyone, to hear him. I fired her, Mark said quietly. Mrs. Ramirez's head snapped up. What? Last night I told Miss Daisy to leave. I thought. He couldn't finish. You thought she hurt Leo? Mark nodded, shame burning through him. Mrs. Ramirez stepped closer. Mr. Anderson, that woman is the only reason my son still believes the world isn't against him. If you fired her, her voice shook. You didn't just take away his teacher, you took away his hope. Mark's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his blood ran cold. It was Miss Daisy. The message read, I'm sorry. I can't stay. Tell Leo I'll pray for him every day. Tell him God has a plan. She was leaving right now. And Mark had no idea if he could stop her. Mark didn't remember saying goodbye to Mrs. Ramirez. He didn't remember running through the hallway or bursting through the front doors of Northwood Academy. He just ran. His hands shook as he dialed Miss Daisy's number. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. The drive home took 12 minutes. Felt like hours. Please God, please let her still be there. He didn't know when he'd started praying again. He hadn't prayed since his wife Sarah's funeral, but the words came anyway, desperate and loud. The house appeared around the corner. Miss Daisy's car was still in the driveway. Mark slammed the brakes, barely putting the car in park before he was out and running toward the front door. She stood in the entryway, suitcase at her feet, keys in her hand. Miss Daisy. She turned. Her eyes were red, but her face was calm, like she had made up her mind. Mr. Anderson, I left instructions for Leo's meals in the kitchen. His doctor's number is on the fridge. He needs... Don't. Mark's voice came out broken. Please don't go. Miss Daisy's jaw tightened. We both know this isn't working. You're right. It's not. Because I've been blind and stupid. He stopped, trying to catch his breath. I just met Ethan. Something flickered across her face. He drew a picture of you, Mark continued. You and Leo and him together. And his mother told me. His voice cracked. She told me you're the only person who's ever called her son friend. Miss Daisy looked away, tears sliding down her cheeks. I accused you of the one thing you'd never do, Mark said. I looked at you like you were a danger when you were the answer to a prayer. I didn't even know I was supposed to be praying. Mr. Anderson. Mark. My name is Mark. She met his eyes. I don't deserve you staying, he said. I know that. But Leo does. And Ethan does. And maybe, he swallowed hard. Maybe God didn't just put you in this house for my son. Maybe he put you here for all of us. Miss Daisy's hand trembled on her suitcase handle. I called the school, Mark continued. Told them you'd train their staff. Told them I'd pay for everything. An interpreter, special books and tools, whatever Ethan needs, but only if you're the one leading it. Miss Daisy stared at him. Why would you do that? Because you were right about everything. About me not really seeing my son. About me treating you like you were just. He couldn't finish. Just the help, she said quietly. You were never just anything. Silence stretched between them, heavy and delicate. Miss Daisy looked down at her suitcase, at the keys in her hand, at the door she'd been about to walk through. If I stay, she said slowly, things have to change. They will. I promise. I don't want promises, Mr. Anderson. Mark. She lifted her chin. I want you to show up for Leo for yourself. Not just when something's wrong. Every day. Mark nodded. I will. And I need you to trust me. Really trust me. Because I can't do this job wondering if you think I'm capable of hurting him. I do trust you. The front door swung open. Leo stood there, backpack on, his face pale. Daddy. His voice was small and scared. Why is Miss Daisy's suitcase out? Mark and Miss Daisy both froze. I thought. Leo's eyes filled with tears. You said she could stay. You promised. She's not leaving, buddy. Leo turned and ran. Not upstairs, not to his room, but out the door, down the driveway, into the street. Leo. Mark's heart stopped. A car horn blared loudly. The car screeched to a stop, just inches from Leo. The driver, an old lady, sat frozen, her hands gripping the wheel, her face white with shock. Leo stood in the middle of the street, his chest heaving, tears streaming down his face. Mark reached him first, dropping to his knees, his hands running over Leo's arms, his face, checking for injuries that weren't there. Are you okay? Are you hurt? Leo shook his head, sobbing. Miss Daisy appeared beside them, breathless. Leo, baby, what were you thinking? You were leaving. Leo's voice came out like a wail. I saw your suitcase and you were leaving, and I thought if I wasn't here you'd stay. If I left instead, you wouldn't have to go. Those words shattered something in Mark's chest. Oh, sweetheart. Miss Daisy pulled Leo into her arms. That's not how this works. You don't leave. You never leave. But Daddy said you had to go, and I don't want you to go. Leo's words tumbled out, broken and desperate. Mark's throat closed up. He looked at this little boy, his son, falling apart in the street because the one person who made him feel safe was walking away, because Mark had made her leave. I'm not going anywhere, Miss Daisy said, holding Leo tight. You hear me? I'm staying. Leo pulled back a little, his eyes red and swollen. Promise. Miss Daisy looked at Mark. The question in her eyes was clear. Can I promise that? Mark nodded, his own eyes burning. I promise, Miss Daisy whispered, kissing Leo's forehead. The old lady finally got out of her car, shaking. Is he all right? Oh my goodness, I almost... He's okay, Mark said, his voice shaky. Thank you for stopping. She pressed a hand to her chest. I was praying the whole way down this street to drive carefully. God must have been listening. Mark looked at Leo in Miss Daisy's arms, at the way his son clung to her like she was the only strong, solid thing in his world. God must have been listening. Maybe he had been all along. Let's get you inside, buddy, Mark said softly. They walked back to the house together, Leo between them, holding both their hands. The suitcase still sat by the door. Miss Daisy walked past it without looking. Inside, Leo finally stopped crying. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, then looked up at Miss Daisy. Can I still learn the signs for Ethan? Miss Daisy smiled through her tears. Every single day if you want. Leo nodded. Then he turned to Mark. Daddy, will you learn too? Mark's breath caught. You want me to? Yeah, so we can both talk to him together. Mark looked at his son, really looked at him, at the hope in his eyes, at how brave he was to ask. Yes, Mark said. I'll learn. Leo's face broke into the first real smile Mark had seen in months. And Miss Daisy? Miss Daisy looked at Mark with something that wasn't quite forgiveness yet, but it was very, very close. That night, after Leo was asleep, Mark sat at the kitchen table. Miss Daisy appeared in the doorway, 2 cups of tea in her hands. She set one in front of him without a word. Thank you, Mark said quietly, for staying, for everything. Miss Daisy sat across from him. I didn't stay for you. I know. I stayed for Leo and for Ethan, and because I think God wants me here. Mark nodded. Then I'm grateful he does. They sat in silence, the heavy feelings of the day settling around them. Finally, Miss Daisy spoke. There's something you need to know. Mark looked up. Ethan's mother called me an hour ago, Miss Daisy said. The school board meeting is tomorrow. They're voting on whether to keep Ethan enrolled or ask him to leave. Mark's jaw tightened. What? Principal Thompson pushed it through. An emergency meeting. Miss Daisy's hands wrapped around her mug. If they vote him out, he has nowhere else to go. This was his last chance. Then we stop them. How? Mark stood. I don't know yet. But we don't let that boy lose everything because adults are too afraid to try. Miss Daisy studied him for a long moment. You really mean that? Yes. Then you better be ready, she said quietly. Because this fight, it's just beginning. And Mark realized everything they'd been through, everything that had happened, it had all been leading to this moment. The school board meeting was packed. Parents filled every seat, and there were people standing in the back. Mark walked in with Miss Daisy beside him and Leo holding his hand. Mrs. Ramirez sat in the front row. Ethan pressed close to her side. Principal Thompson stood at the podium, reading from a paper. While we believe in including everyone, we must make sure all students are safe. Because of the things that have happened with Ethan Ramirez, the board suggests, I'd like to speak. Every head turned. Mark walked to the front, Leo still holding his hand. My name is Mark Anderson. My son Leo is in Ethan's class. He paused, looking at all the faces staring back at him. 2 weeks ago, Ethan pushed my son. Leo has bruises. He was hurt. Whispers went around the room. Mrs. Ramirez's face looked very sad. And I was angry, Mark continued. I wanted someone to blame, someone to punish, because that's easier than asking why a child would get so upset in the first place. He looked down at Leo, who nodded up at him. But my son, my 7-year-old son, he asked a different question. He asked how he could help, how he could understand. And that question changed everything. Mark's voice got stronger. Ethan isn't violent. He's lonely. He's spent his whole life in a world that doesn't speak his language. And we're punishing him for being frustrated. We're punishing him for being deaf. Mr. Anderson, one board member interrupted. We understand you care, but this isn't about caring, Mark said firmly. This is about treating people fairly. Mark pointed to Miss Daisy. This woman taught my son sign language in 3 days. 3 days. And you're telling me a school full of trained teachers can't do the same? Principal Thompson's face turned red. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. Mark looked directly at the school board. I'm offering to pay for everything. Training and interpreter, special books and tools, whatever Ethan needs, and whatever future students like him will need. But only if he stays. Silence. And if he doesn't? One board member asked. Then I pull Leo, Mark replied. And I'll make sure every parent in this town knows that Northwood Academy kicked out a child for being deaf. The room got loud with talking. Principal Thompson tried to make everyone quiet, but it was too late. Leo tugged on Mark's sleeve. Daddy, can I say something? Mark looked down, surprised. You want to speak? Leo nodded. Mark lifted him up so everyone could see. Leo's small voice carried across the room. Ethan's my friend, and friends don't give up on each other. Then Leo looked at Ethan and signed slowly, carefully, the words Miss Daisy had taught him. FRNE. FRR. Ethan's eyes went wide. Tears streamed down his cheeks. He signed back, his hands shaking. You. Mrs. Ramirez started to cry, really cry, and the board voted without anyone disagreeing. Ethan stayed. 3 months later, Mark stood in the back of Leo's classroom, watching something he never thought he'd see. 22 second graders signing good morning to each other. And to Ethan. Ethan sat in the middle of the room, surrounded by friends, laughing quietly at something another boy signed. Leo caught Mark's eye and waved. Mark waved back, his throat feeling a little tight. Miss Daisy appeared beside him. You're here. I'm here, Mark said. Every Friday, just like I promised. She smiled. He's doing well. Because of you. Miss Daisy shook her head. Because of him and you and God putting us all in the right place at the right time. Mark watched his son. He watched Ethan. He watched a classroom full of children who had learned that differences weren't something to be scared of. They were something to celebrate. I'm sorry, Mark said quietly, for everything I said that first day. For how I treated you. Miss Daisy looked at him. You were protecting your son. No, I was protecting my fear. He turned to face her. But you taught me what it really means to see people, to show up, to love like God loves. Miss Daisy's eyes filled with tears. Mark, you're family now, he said. Not the help. Not the housekeeper. Family. And I need you to know that. She wiped her eyes, smiling. I already knew. Leo ran over, Ethan right behind him. Daddy, Ethan wants to come to our house for dinner. Can he? Mark looked at Ethan, who signed hopefully. Of course he can, Mark said. Miss Daisy translated. Ethan's face lit up. Mrs. Ramirez appeared in the doorway. Her work uniform was on. She looked tired, but she was smiling. Thank you, she said to Mark. For everything. Thank me. Mark shook his head. Your son taught mine what courage looks like. We're the ones who should be thanking you. And as they all walked out together, Mark, Leo, Miss Daisy, Ethan, and Mrs. Ramirez, Mark realized something important. He had spent 3 years believing that being sad meant building walls around himself. But God had sent Miss Daisy to show him the truth. That getting better meant building bridges. And sometimes the people we think we're saving end up saving us instead.